I need you to knock some sense into me. I'm sure you can.
Yeah, I don't know. I enjoy listening to you. I don't always agree with everything.
All right. Enough of this persiflage.
So, you want my question?
I'm certainly not going to get myself in trouble by telling you what to do.
That makes great sense. Gosh, that's good.
Did I overwhelm you with words and wisdom?
I've got 7 kids. I feel like I could call you every day.
Wait, you're telling me I'm wrong?
Yes, I am, Dr. Ray.
You just need to tune in to Dr. Ray, honey. He's got all the answers.
Am I right or am I right?
Probably.
Now, from the studios of Living Bread Radio Network in Canton, Ohio, the hometown of Mother Angelica, here's Dr. Ray.
Well, maybe for you, it's theirs, Dr. Ray. I'm not personally present where you are, but I can talk to you. The saints bilocate. I can't do any of that. Unless I gain weight, then I can take up more space, but it's still the same space. I can bilocute, which is talk to 2 different people at the same time, or 2 different places at the same time, which is even more impressive. The program here is The Doctor Is In. Of course, we took that name from Lucy Van Pelt in the Peanuts comics, where she would charge 5 cents. Yeah, remember that? 5 cents. Sign underneath her little table there, The Doctor Is In. 5 cents. Now, looking back on that, just way back, 40, 50 years ago in Peanuts comic, she was pretty cheap. Doesn't even cost you 5 cents here. Unless you support your local Catholic radio station. Then indirectly, you're paying for this. But as you call in, you're paying nothing. So I don't even get what Lucy Van Pelt gets. And she was what? 6 years old? Giving advice? No degree? No experience? And she gets 5 cents? I don't get anything. All I can do is say a penny for your thoughts, and I'll give you my 2 cents, which is double your money back. This is Look Back Friday. It's an idea we came up with some years ago. Andrew Kruchek, my producer man, informs me it's probably about 11 years ago now. And I said, I get frustrated. A lot of calls come in, and I just wish I could talk a lot more with each person. Obviously, I was trained in therapy, so when you do therapy, you got a lot of time to explore all kinds of dynamics and things going on with the person. You can uncover inconsistencies, you can explain, you can probe, you can do all kinds of therapy stuff. You can't do that on a radio show. And you better not try. And I've said this many times. I don't do therapy here, and I don't diagnose here. And I certainly do not comment on another therapist. What we do is educate a little bit. And sometimes I want to give a few more points when a person calls in. Whether it's a direction I would have wanted to go, but I didn't, because clearly they were headed in their own direction. Whether it was something they said in passing because it was familiar to them, but wouldn't be familiar so much to our listeners, and I wanted to explain it, but to explain it would have digressed, etc., 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 and there were other people on the line. So Look Back Friday is reserved for a little more explanation. And if you get down to it, as St. Thomas Aquinas says, you're looking for motivations, follow the self. Well, that's probably kind of the motivation for Look Back Friday. I just want to hear myself talk more. We will get to those calls. I've spoken about this before, and I deal with a lot of folks who pretty much will share the same experience. We have a very sexually confused culture. At the very least, it's confused. You could use a lot more pejorative words than confused. We pretty much allow, and I dare say celebrate, any kind of sexual conduct you wish, with anyone consenting. Anywhere, anyhow, anywho. But there is one group that gets assaulted verbally for their sexual conduct. Heavily And that is married mothers committed to the same guy who have more than 1.86 children. I don't hear it commented on in too many places. But it seems such a huge cultural irony that in a culture that says you can act out any way you want, you can do whatever you wish sexually, and don't anybody dare say anything about what I want to do. And yet, everyone feels free to comment and critique mothers and fathers who welcome children in a marriage. How did this happen? Oh, a lot of reasons. I've wrestled with it. Population explosion, we're going to bury the world in people. Catholics are the worst. Latter-day Saints are right up there. Islam, having more than their allotted amounts of children. That's one factor. Of course, all the research on population has now just blown to bits the idea that we're going to continue to have so many kids that the earth will soon begin to contracting in 80 or more developed countries already. Nobody saw that coming. Nobody saw it coming. That's why you always look at these experts with their predictions about the future and how many times do they have to be proven wrong before they get some proper humility. So why do we? I think some of it comes from the fact that as discipline has become more difficult for a lot of parents, and it truly has, okay, because the experts have really constricted parents in what they're allowed to do, psychologically speaking, and as parental self-confidence has been corroded, and as the culture has become more assaulting of good parents, more and more people are having trouble with their 1 or 2 children. And so they can't even fathom why somebody would have 5 or 6 or 7. As evidenced by, how many do you have? 7. I can't handle the 2 I have. I can't even imagine 7. It's evidenced by that. Another one is, well, we can't afford it. Well, it depends. When we had 10 kids, all of bike riding age, we rarely had more than 3 or 4 bikes. And these were used bikes from a guy down the street who refurbished bikes, and we'd drive by there every so often and see what he had laying in the front yard because that's what we got. When one of the used bikes just broke, and they didn't last all that long, but we had 3 or 4, that's it. You shared the bikes. Sure, we didn't have all the activities because we had 10 kids. They were none the worse to wear for any of that. And I do suspect that the lack of bikes for every single child actually helped them in charity and sharing. And, of course, they didn't have the same bedrooms, 3 or 4 to a bedroom the way it was. So it depends how much they cost, depending on what you do about it. Also, another reason is that, unfortunately, it's more moms are working outside the home. So that makes it very difficult. I mean, you get a mom who has 5, 6, 7 kids. For the most part, she can't work outside the home. I mean, that gets really complex. It gets complicated. So that's a factor. That is a factor. But I guess my question was, in my mom's day, which was 3 generations ago now, how did they do it? I mean, many of the moms, a much higher percentage of the moms, stayed at home. How did that happen? Well, because they didn't live as high. We, growing up, had a 1,200 square foot ranch. We had 4 kids. Didn't have air conditioning until I was in college, and that was in the back family room. We had a box air conditioner. Had 1 car, then we went to 2, but they were both used. Our phone bill was about $9, not your basic $200 phone bill now. with smartphones and everything involved. So, yeah, as technology increased, more and more people, quote-unquote, needed that technology. And they got web streaming services to get 593 channels on one service. I shouldn't say channels. That's an old word anymore. So, yeah, we lived more simply, and that was just figured. That was middle class. We were solidly middle class. They don't even build houses that small now. Nobody wants them. You want a house that small, you gotta buy a used one. So given that, that's a factor. Obviously, children aren't needed for labor like they used to be needed for in centuries past. Family farms, family unity, the kids all cooperated in making things work in the family. So that's not necessary. Not so much anymore. But that's all irrelevant because for all of our vaunted celebration of choice, that doesn't seem to be a choice that we allow those mothers and fathers who choose to have more than 2 children. They actually sometimes get abused, that they're foolish, they're stupid. You know how this is happening? Don't you have a TV? I had a friend, had 10 children. He said after about kid 5 or 6, they did not tell any of the relatives who were out of state that she was pregnant. They didn't want to hear it. They did not want to get the grief. What gives people the idea that they are free to comment on you moms? And the only time you're allowed to have more than 2 is if you have 2 boys first or 2 girls first, and then you get, well, you're trying for your boy, right? Or the doctors and the nurses who hand you contraceptive materials and folders and everything else after you go in there pregnant for the 3rd time, as though you're just ignorant. What are you doing? It's a phenomenon. And I wish more people would talk about it. But they don't. But it's an irony, is it not? It's a grand irony. The only people we reserve our opprobrium for are the people who are acting responsibly with their sexual lives and who are welcoming what many people still believe is the gift of children. And I will close with this. When you've been a shrink for a long time, you see trends. Trends that you can only see through experience. I have yet to hear an elderly person say, I had too many children. Now, they might say, I had some difficult children, or I had some children that made my life rough. They might say that. I've never heard them say I've had too many. But I've heard quite a few say, I wish I would have had more children. Dr. Ray.
I know it was you.
I don't want to talk about it.
The doctor will be with you in just a moment.
Mother Teresa said, the poverty of being unwanted, unloved, and uncared for is the greatest poverty. At St. Joseph's Helpers, their mission is not only to repair homes for those in need, but to repair hearts by providing companionship and peace of mind, especially for the veterans and the elderly. Their dedicated volunteers give their time to help with small household repairs, including minor plumbing and electrical. To request service, volunteer, or donate, visit St. Joseph's Helpers today at sjhelpers.org. That's sjhelpers.org.
I don't think we've replaced our siding since we moved in 20 years ago. But I'm sure it's still fine, right?
We better call Mighty Dog Roofing of Ann Arbor.
Damaged siding can cause mold buildup and weaken your home structure. Protect your family by calling local Catholics Dan and Mary Flanagan at Mighty Dog Roofing for a free inspection of your siding, roof, or windows. Mighty Dog Roofing, 734-224-4916. That's 734-224-4916.
Hello, Steve Ray here from Footprints of God Pilgrimages. Want to celebrate some amazing anniversaries this year in France? We'll visit Normandy Beach to celebrate our heroic military for the 80th anniversary of D-Day. Also, the 100th anniversary of the canonization of St. Teresa of Lisieux. Join us this October for our Saints and Shrines of France and a visit to the newly renovated Notre Dame Cathedral.
Find the Ave Maria Radio travel tab at AveMariaRadio.net.
Underwritten in part by the following nonprofit.
Are you paying high prices with a traditional health insurance company that pays for things that violate your conscience? There's an alternative available. Solidarity HealthShare is a community of faithful individuals and families that never share into immoral medical services, all while saving you money with prices starting as low as $85 per month for singles and $512 for families. Never fund another abortion with your healthcare dollars. Call 844-313-4999 to learn more.
Thank you so much for joining me. Dr. Ray Guarendi here, Program Dr. Zid. Variant of the program, E-Person Friday. Let's go to Teresa from Pennsylvania, who was feeling pretty disrespected that someone in her family had a funeral and nobody told her. Your brother's son was how old?
He was 26.
Oh, accident, overdose, suicide?
No, he was working at a restaurant, and apparently he and this other employee both liked the same girl, and the employee came in and shot my nephew and accidentally wounded one other person, yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh.
So I only met my nephew at my mom's funeral a few years ago because I had talked to you a few years ago about my brother having a wedding. I wasn't invited. He had been estranged from the family. I'm the only one he's still estranged with, but nobody will tell me why. And you gave me the great advice of, like, you can't make him tell you anything. And, and I'm like, whoa, you were obviously so right. But so I've been using that. So over the years when I was sitting at my mom's bedside as she was dying, and he would come in and, there would be tension, I was just like, just let it go, you're here for Mom. But now my sister lives in the same town as I was. I was visiting my daughter when this happened, so I was just like calling and like, have we heard anything, the name of the funeral home, like, what can I do? And at first they were acting like, oh, well, we're not going to go, and blah, blah, blah. My sister had just had surgery done and all this stuff. And then on the day before the funeral, I called them, and they're on their way to North Carolina for the funeral. So now I've kind of been avoiding, my sister and I live in a small town, like, I know people are that she knows, I'm sure she told them that he died, or maybe she didn't, I don't know, because she won't talk to me about it. But, like, what if somebody comes up and says, oh, I'm sorry about your nephew, or how was the funeral? And then what do I say? Like, oh, well, my sisters bailed on me. They didn't let me go.
No, Teresa, you don't have to say that. You simply say, how was the funeral? Well, if they say, how was the funeral, you simply say, I don't know. I wasn't able to make the funeral. There you go.
Yeah, but then I feel like a jerk for not going to my nephew's funeral. My gosh, I would have gone.
Well, hold on a second. I was going to say, as I was looking at this on the computer board here, I was thinking, all right, I'm going to talk to Teresa about not taking this personal. But it does sound like, you tell me if I'm wrong, because sometimes women are very good at telling me I'm wrong. It does sound like he didn't want you there.
That's probably right.
Because right now you're still the one that he doesn't have much contact with, right?
Right. Yes, that is true.
It's really hard to know sometimes why someone doesn't want you in their lives. If they don't tell you, if their attitude is, you don't need to know, all you need to know is I don't want you around, you're stuck.
Right.
You're stuck.
Right.
I see a lot of, and I don't know if this is your situation, Teresa, but I see a lot of situations where people don't want religious people around. Religious people bug them.
Well, brothers. I am probably the most, I yeah, I'm probably the most religious person in my family. I can say that.
And they probably view you as, well, I don't like the way she is. I don't like her morals. I don't like her judgmentalness. I don't like this about her. I don't like that about her. It sounds like, here you got two levels to this, Teresa. One is, you can't know for sure, but probably your brother deliberately didn't invite you. Okay, there's one.
Right.
The second level is, you don't have to be ashamed that you didn't go. Not at all. And if somebody says, well, what kind of jerk are you? You didn't go to your nephew's funeral who was tragically murdered.
I know. It was like all over the news. It was awful. Yeah.
You simply say, I just didn't have the chance to go, or I couldn't go. Now, if they think that, well, what's with you? Well, then they got a problem.
Right.
You can't do anything about what they're going to interpret.
That's true.
You don't have to worry about it.
What hurts me is my sisters would just come right out and say.
No, you know why they didn't? Here's my guess. You know why they didn't? Because they didn't want to tell you that they were invited and you weren't. So they tried to massage it. They tried to say, well, yeah, I don't know if we can go either. And then they knew they were going to go. But they just figured, okay, well, let's just not tell Teresa she wasn't invited, but we were. Or known, deliberately contacted, but we were. Yeah, that's what they did. This happens a lot. It's a theme, a common theme that erupts not just here on the radio, but in my office, which is people who take their faith as the center of their life, and they try to live well. And they may not be judgmental at all in keeping their opinions to themselves. They don't say anything about how others in their family are living, the choices they're making. They don't. But what happens is they get impugned because of the way they think. I know how you think, and I know that you're judging me. That's how they view it. So as a result, we tend to underestimate how some people are threatened by other people's religious views. You truly are. Even if you are exquisite in trying not to push those views on your family members because you know how they're going to react. So here's Teresa, probably, as she said, and I knew if we dug around long enough we'd hear it, she was the most religious one of the gang. I don't know how the nephew viewed that, but if they viewed it as, well, we're not real close to her because she just thinks a certain way religiously, she thinks a certain way politically, and we're just, we can't relate to that woman. So, as a consequence, they didn't want her there. And initially, they ducked and bobbed and weaved. Yeah, well, we might not go either. That was a bunch of nonsense. It really was. They figured they could probably get Teresa to just leave it go at that. But then she found out. She found out they went. They said they weren't going to go. Why? Why wouldn't they tell me? Oh, the answer's real clear. They don't like the way you think. They don't like the way you look at life. They don't like who you are. We tend to underestimate that because we think to ourselves, how could they do this? We're trying to live a good life. We're trying to be fair. We're trying to be charitable. We're trying to be nice. We're doing the very best thing I can do. Now, Father Larry Richards often talks about how we Christians are sometimes among the most judgmental of people, and that can be true. But I'm addressing those of you who are just really trying to live a good, Christ-centered life with all of its charity and love exuding from your every pore, and still other people ain't going to like you just like they didn't like Christ. He was sinless. He was love incarnate. And a whole bunch of people didn't like him at all. Intensely disliked him. So don't be shocked when you got relatives ducking around you because they don't like what you've decided to put at the center of your life. They kind of take that as a threat. As that somehow down deep, you're thinking quite ill of them. They don't want you to be around.
Welcome back to the Doctor Is In program.
Don't you just picture somebody jauntily, airily walking down the street as the opening clips for the episode begin? Kind of a sitcom kind of thing, you know. She's just kind of waving and smiling to everybody. That's the kind of music that conjures up. Dr. Ray here. Thank you for joining me. Doctor is in. This is Look Back Friday. Let's see what we got here. I got to always look at the time between breaks because Andrew Truchek, my producer man who edits these calls, he puts the time of the call, how much it takes up, and then I have to see if it will fit well in the break. So that would be there to there to there. Let's go with the shorter one. Let's go to Anna from Wisconsin.
So I have a situation at home where we have a 8th grader that is currently in a Catholic school, and we're discerning how to, choices for high school, and there's a private and a public, and we kind of did our pros and cons, and my husband is very strong in the public, and I had a lot of concerns in public. My son is kind of divided because he feels like, okay, Mom wants one thing, Dad wants another thing. So it's been a long, long haul. The more I pray, the worse it gets. So well, my dear, what? I can't convince you, and I feel like I put the facts, and I can't get into his mind. So at this point where my son is kind of looking at both, and he's going to tell us what he wants to do, where he would like to go. But my husband is more like, I'm absolutely not supporting going to private school. So
he's pretty definite about that, huh?
Yes.
Ooh.
And his point of view in a nutshell is that the public school, he will have a chance to play sports, and by playing sports, he will go to school and he would be a good kid. If he goes to private, in his opinion, every kid is entitled, and then sports are too tough. He won't make the team because we're not rich, so then he's going to do drugs, and that's his opinion. And I cannot get him out of that mindset.
Yeah, if he's clinging to that mindset, you're not going to be able to give him reasons that would be stronger than that. If he thinks his kid's going to just go downhill if he goes to a Catholic school because he thinks that Catholic schools are now just for rich kids, it's not really the case anymore because in Ohio, for example, there's a lot of school choice, and a lot of the Catholic schools have kids there on school choice scholarships. All right, so let's look at this.
Yeah.
All right. First of all, I saw you. Well, I didn't see you. I heard you. I heard you tearing up. And for you, Anna, this isn't something necessarily to tear up over because you really don't know how it's going to unfold. That's one.
Mm-hmm.
Your husband doesn't want him to go to Catholic school because he doesn't think the school's all that Catholic. He just thinks it's kind of a private school with a lot of uppity kids. That's what he thinks.
Exactly, yes.
Okay. In the public school, now, of course, you're going to lose pretty much any ability to talk about God, any ability to have religion class. I guess I will say this, though, Anna. I had a priest friend, and he maintained this. Now, I'm not saying this is true, but I can see his thinking. He said, send your kids to Catholic elementary school, but be very cautious about sending them to Catholic high school. What he was speaking to was the sad state where a lot of Catholic high schools are really not all that Catholic anymore. They're just kind of like private schools with a little bit of religion painted over top. Now, there's some real good Catholic schools out there, and only you know where they are in your area, or if they are in your area. Only you know that. I don't know that. If your husband is absolutely dead set, no maneuvering, no wiggle room, nothing about him going anywhere but the public school, you and your son are kind of stuck.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. It doesn't sound like your husband's going to say, "Well, okay, I don't want him to go to Catholic school, but he just told me he wants to go to Catholic school, so that's okay." I mean, would he do that?
That's what I'm struggling, trying to say, hey, I'm willing to look at opportunities and what the public school can do and make him go to college and all those objectives we have. Why can't you do the same? But you're absolutely right. He's not. Okay. He's saying everybody's going to be unhappy if he doesn't go where I want him to go.
All right.
Which I don't think is fair for...
Well, again, you're right. You'd like him to be more reasonable about it, but he's not. Okay, so do this. Compromise. Tell your husband, all right, public school it is. However, will you agree to me that if he starts having any kind of trouble and he starts getting very, very heavily culturally shaped, we will rethink this. If you can get your husband to agree to that, that might be the way to go. My 2 older children were in school. I, at the time, was consulting to about 11 school districts. My wife wanted to homeschool. I was against it. I thought a number of things. I thought, one, here I am as a consultant to all these school districts, and my kids are not in school per se. And 2, I had a lot of very fond memories when I was in elementary school, all the neat things you did, the activities and Christmas time plays and all that stuff. My wife's view was, if Ray isn't on board with this, I can't do it. And I think that is something in many marriages that you have to accept, which is if you got a spouse that's flat out vetoing something, rather than making this a major friction point in your marriage, and that's what it sounds like could happen here, or if it's not already happening, you can't do that because both think, however mistakenly that might be, that they're right. One has to yield, and if in fact the more reasonable person says, well, that other person's not budging, and I don't want to continue this to be a huge marriage fracture point, you got to let it go. Got to let it go. Knowing that, this doesn't mean, and I think this is what Mom was worried about, I think she was thinking that her son was going to be irreparably damaged spiritually and socially, other ways, culturally, if he goes to public school. That's what she was thinking. Well, that's not necessarily true at all. You don't know how he's going to react to that. He might do very well. No, there's no way to predict that. But I think the key is here that husband vetoed it. My wife and I had a rule. Each partner has veto power. So if someone wants to do something but the other partner says no, it was viewed as, I'm going to respect that you have reasons for your decision, and we each allowed the other veto power. There's things I want to do, and my wife said, "Nah, I'm not into that, Ray. I don't think that's a good idea." And I learned over the years that she was right more often than I was about that stuff. I'm not just trying to be Mr. Humble Guy, although I am, but she was. So that's a lesson I learned. And I think our caller here, Anna, is very wise to simply say to her husband, okay, we're not going to make this a marital issue. We'll do it this way, and we'll see what happens. Very nice to have you with me here, and The Doctor Is In. This is our version of The Doctor Is In on Fridays. I want to say hi to all our wonderful affiliates. They're all over the place, 400 and some of them, 500 and some worldwide. And they've been getting on me. They've been nagging me to learn some of those languages. So I did. I said, if I'm going to be at this global radio presence, I better learn some of these languages. I'm not too far along. I've been studying about 3 years now. And the one I've got mastered, I think so, Australian. Hello. Do a walkabout. That's pretty much where I'm at. This is Look Back Friday, so let's see. Let's go to Rose from Missouri. She's taking care of her brother, and her brother has brain damage.
Thank you. Okay, I'm calling about the question of, can brain injury cause a person to become or to be just so opinionated and so self lacking of other people's concern and care and attempts to help, but he interprets them as garbage because he is right in everything in every way.
You want a short answer, Rose?
Yeah, I'll take a short and a long.
Okay, I'll give you a short and then I'll go long. Yes is the short answer.
Okay.
But here's my question. Depending upon, obviously, where the brain damage is, the extent of it, depending upon, of course, the plasticity, what they call it, the neural repair of the brain is another factor. But here's the question I would have, and just from the tone of your voice, I would suspect this person is someone close to you.
Yes, he's my brother, and he lives with me.
Okay, that's pretty close. Now, this brain insult, was your brother like that before the brain insult?
Well, he was 4 years old when it happened, and he's 68 right now.
Okay.
He always had trouble in school, always had trouble in jobs, and he's mobile, but a couple of years ago he had a stroke and a heart attack and heart failure, actually.
Yikes.
So there's a lot of compounded stuff now, and he just seems to be getting more and more and more rigid and doesn't want to even trust doctors, or not that he trusted them before, but...
Is he getting a little more paranoid? Suspicious?
I don't think it's that. It just seems to be he knows his body like nobody else knows, and he's not going to trust anybody else.
Rose, you don't argue with him, do you?
No, not most of the time. I don't. I might say a rebuttal once or twice, but I've learned to shut my mouth for the most part. But I will bring up another point of, well, if you do this, then this could happen. I mean, you worry too much. That won't happen to me because I trust God. Well, you can trust God while a truck hits you, Just things happen. And, God,
obviously,
God
the fact that he's with you indicates that he's had a hard time navigating life because of that very early brain assault.
Yes. And, they didn't have special ed back then, and I think my mom pretty much shielded him from everything, and I inherited him when he was in his 40s. So, anyway.
You said something significant. You said my mother shielded him. I don't know if you heard my talk with a couple of the people who called in earlier, where I said that if a parent thinks that a child has a particular handicap, sometimes that can dramatically alter their parenting, and there's a lot of allowance made for behavior they shouldn't have allowed. Did that happen with your mom?
I think so.
Okay, there's two. All right, I'm 2 for 2. He stayed with your mom until he was into his 40s, so basically that means independently he couldn't function all that well. 3 for 3?
Correct.
Mom passed away or became unable to care for him.
Right.
4 for 4. I'm going to stop right now because I don't want to ruin up my perfect record here. You being the older sister?
I'm older than he is.
Okay, 5 for 5. Said somebody needs to take care of, and I don't know your brother's name, but let's just call him David. Somebody needs to take care of David, and you said, okay, I can. How long has he been with you, Rose?
20 years.
Whoa! Okay, I just thought this was, well, you've been taking care of David for 3 years, 20 years, all right. And in that 20,
things are getting worse.
Well, that's what I was going to say. In that 20 years, you've noticed he's more difficult to handle. He thinks in a way that creates problems for himself and other people. You've noticed that,
especially since the stroke.
Well, that's fair enough said, because the damage from the stroke can be unpredictable, which can make his personality much more rigid or much more erratic. Much more emotional. He's not aggressive, is he? Is he becoming a management problem?
No, he can become that way, but very seldom because I don't engage for it to become that a problem.
You are a smart woman. I would say this, Rose, for your own peace, rather than saying, I've got to understand why he's this way, you probably will be safe in concluding that because of his brain damage then and now, that he can definitely be hard to understand, hard to predict, erratic, inconsistent. It's the way he is. If you expect it, it won't throw you. But if you say to yourself, why does he have to be this way? I don't want him to be this way. How can I get through to him? If you're doing that, Rose, you're going to drive yourself crazy. Oh, there's so much more to be said. But this is an example of where I didn't listen. Now, I knew this, and I heard it again when she went through the call the second time. Very close to the beginning of her call, she said he was 68. She said he was with his mother until his 40s. Okay, so roughly he would have been with Rose 20-plus years. Simple math. Now, I knew that. I heard that. But for whatever the reason, I didn't digest it because I said, whoa, boy, 20 years. I thought he'd been with you 3 years. Well, in fact, I just blew that. Should have been listening more closely. I was listening, but it didn't register. So that's my excuse. All that said, it's not possible to sort out exactly how identifiable brain damage can affect somebody's personality and conduct, and how much of it is learning, how much of it is response to circumstances that they would otherwise respond to in the same way were they not brain dead. It's not possible. Only God knows that. That infinitely complex neurological structure up there with trillions of neurological connections all just working in some kind of order. You can't do it. You're forced to look at what is happening because of it all. What is clear from what Rose was saying is that he's going to become more difficult. And this may be a process of his brain deteriorating. It could be that he was on the front end of dementia. Not unusual to get dementia as you get older if you've had some kind of brain damage. You're almost predisposed to a brain that ceases whatever pre-dementia functioning it had. So all that is kind of preparation. It's like someone who is taking care of a spouse with dementia. And in the early stages, the first 2, 3, 4, 5 years of the dementia, it can be done. You make certain adjustments, it can be done. But the direction of dementia is always one way, downward. And things begin to happen that are much more difficult to deal with, perhaps even dangerous to deal with. So, at this point, Rose's best move is to not antagonize. If she argues with him, he's absolutely convinced his perception is correct. Now, you can say, well, is that his brain damage or is that just his personality? I don't know. Doesn't matter. What does matter is that's what he does. And it's not going to change. So she's wise in not continuing the word back and forth with him, because that just agitates him. He gets very angry that she is questioning him. That's the first thing. Second thing is to recognize, and I could have said all this when she called, but it was already a 6-minute call. The second thing was to recognize he's going to say a lot of things that are going to make her uneasy. For example, he might say something like, well, I know my body, these doctors don't, and I know there's nothing there that's a problem. And she's thinking, yes, that is a problem. There is something there that's a problem. You don't know more than a doctor. But if she can't get him to move, she's done. She can't force him to the doctor. She may have to recognize that given his thinking, given the effect of the brain damage, given his personality, whatever, he's going to be convinced that he sees things a certain way, and the way he sees them could be dangerous for himself. Could be, in a way, self-destructive, certainly affect his health. And there's nothing she can do about that. That's the problem. She's basically saying, how can I get him to see? We can't. I've had enough experience. And she kept saying, she said 2 or 3 times, he's getting worse. Not surprising. And she said it's gotten worse since the stroke. Well, sure, the stroke added more brain damage. And again, what is brain damage? Well, it depends. It depends where, it depends how much, like I said. Depends what part of the brain it affects. Certain things. It interacts with the premorbid personality, what the person was like prior to the brain damage. Well, since his major assault happened when he was 4, okay, we really can't know what his personality, adult personality, was prior to brain damage. So he's always had brain damage. And we also don't know what spoiledness he developed because Mom protected him, made allowances for him, catered to him, permissive in her style. We don't know. That was a factor too, but irrelevant because now he is the way he is. That's the difference. You can't look back and go, oh, see all these causes? Yeah, so what? God knows every single bit of the causes, but he isn't going to directly intervene and say, okay, I'll make him do this. He still allows that kind of damaged free will. And I think for Rose, at some point, he may become unmanageable. It's not there yet, but that's a possibility. And if she would recognize that, I'm speaking to anybody here who's also dealing with somebody with brain damage, most common elderly person with dementia, at some point, the decision gets real tough. And you have to know that it could be coming. And you recognize how to just keep a lid on potential conflict with the person as they pretty much lose the ability to be reasonable about a lot of things. Dr. Ray.
Do you own popular index mutual funds or ETFs? If so, you're automatically own shares of companies that conflict with your moral beliefs. Ave Maria mutual funds are managed to conform to pro-life and pro-family values. Long-term investors can invest in the no-load Ave Maria mutual funds. The experienced professional portfolio managers make decisions based on investment fundamentals and pro-life values. You can learn more about Ave Maria mutual funds today at 866-AVE-MARIA or visit AveMariaFunds.com. The Heart of the Interior Life with Elizabeth Jingle.
In the 7th rule of St. Ignatius of Loyola's 14 Rules for the Discernment of Spirits, St. Ignatius writes, "Let one who is in desolation consider how the Lord has left him in trial in his natural powers." In the 7th rule, St. Ignatius invites us to utilize the God-given gifts, the natural powers of our mind, will, memory, and imagination to assist us when we are undergoing the trial of spiritual desolation. Father Timothy Gallagher writes, "Persons in spiritual desolation feel no assistance or presence of the Lord with them. They feel rather that all that remains in them is the use of their natural powers, their ability to think, to choose, to call certain truths to mind, to envisage spiritual realities, and all the human powers given to them by the Creator. How might you utilize the gift of these natural powers?"
For more information, visit AveMariaRadio.net. We are the pro-life generation, passionate about building the culture of life in our healthcare and in our nation. But not all healthcare options are equally pro-life, and some provide morally objectionable procedures. CMF Curo is different. CMF Curo is a pro-life Catholic healthcare ministry providing a pathway for its members to build the culture of life in their healthcare choices, not destroy it. Learn more about CMF Curo at mycatholichealthcare.com. That's mycatholichealthcare.com.
that music's a little too intellectual for me, Andrew. You know, that's kind of like playing Jeopardy music when I'm Wheel of Fortune, you know? I want to say something smart, but it's not coming to me. All that's coming to me is a headache as I try to think about something intelligent to say. Looking at the clock, what do I got? 40 seconds left? How do I stall for 40 seconds? It's simple enough. I didn't say this during Rose's call, but I am so heroically impressed by people. Well, I'm not heroically impressed. I'm impressed by their heroicism in years-long taking care of someone who can't function independently. She's been doing it for 20-some years, that woman. I doubt that she has a day left in purgatory to have to serve. Matter of fact, I'd want to tell Rose, hey, Rose, could you give me some of yours, please? My gosh. Those are the real heroes of the faith. Thank you for joining me here on The Doctor's Inn. I appreciate it. Thanks, Andrew Kruchek, my producer man, my friend over there at Ave. And thanks to all of you for keeping us company. Good Lord permitting. See you on Monday.
For information on Dr. Ray's presentations, books, and CDs, visit drray.com and follow him on Facebook and Instagram. The Doctor Is In is a co-production of Ave Maria Radio and EWTN Radio and carried across the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.